Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the session 3, panel A of the International Research Symposium 2022, organized by the Department of Sociology, Faculty of Arts, University of Colombo. The topic of this panel is Agrarian Responses to Uncertainty. Each presenter has 20 minutes to present their paper. We will notify you at 5 minutes and 2 minutes. This panel is chaired by Dr. Tharindi Udalagama. Dr. Tharindi Udalagama is a senior lecturer in sociology at the Department of Sociology, Faculty of Arts, University of Colombo. I invite Dr. Tharindi Udalagama to chair the session. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I hope I'm audible. So thank you, Ruini. Welcome to the panel, Agrarian Responses to Uncertainty. We have three presentations today in English medium, that is. So the format would be each presenter will get 20 minutes to present their paper. And then after all papers are presented, at the very end, we will open for question and answers and have a discussion. So I invite everyone, the audience, to send in their questions through the chat box or even to unmute and ask the questions at the very end of the panel. At the onset, we will start with the impact of nutmeg. Or do we have Ms. Geetanjali? Ms. Geetanjali, are you ready to present?
Yeah,
okay.
Madam. I am.
Okay. Right. Thank you. In that case, we will first have Ms. Geetanjali's presentation titled Gender Inequality in Agrarian Sector During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Ms. Geetanjali, over to you. Over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Sachini Geetanjali from Department of Political Science and Public Policy, Faculty of Arts, University of Colombo. In my presentation, I would like to talk on gender inequality in agrarian sector during the COVID-19 pandemic. This research based on a case study of the Paravilavatta Tamil estate in Munarakala district. Then, to move on the content page, firstly, I would like to discuss the research background, then objectives, thirdly, methods and methodology, after that, research findings, then conclusion, and finally, I would like to present my references. Firstly, we will move to the research background. The COVID-19 pandemic created a severe threat to worldwide people's lives and livelihoods. It represented not only economic and social but also gender inequality crisis. The agricultural women became vulnerable in her job, family, and society. At the same time, COVID-19 related documents issued by interactive human rights bodies reveal notable attention to how emergency measures have impacted agrarian women and disproportionately put the enjoyment of their human rights. Then, the main research objective is identify the differences in gender stereotypes between families and the agrarian workplace and then provide the recommendations to accelerate the advancement of gender equality through the agricultural sector. The main research problem is why did agrarian estate women become more vulnerable than men during the pandemic period? Discuss about the methods and methodology. The main research research sample based on the Aravilavattu Tamil estate in the Mularagalu district. The research sample mainly focused on the 15 to 50 age category of 200 both men and women in the estate. Using the semi-structured interviews, discussions, and observations with the collecting of data. And also, I have utilized patron-client relationship theory, patronicity theory, the analyzing of the data. Then, move to the findings of the research. Female employees have been disproportionately and negatively affected by the COVID-19 crisis, vice versa, their male counterparts. Men tend to be employed in highly skilled sectors, for example, manufacturing, construction, hotel management, or security employees. Although the men lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the women had to continue working in the rubber or sugar plantation or farm nearby plantation fields. However, many men lost their jobs during the lockdown. Although they could get involved and support, they didn't. Instead, many men were addicted to alcohol and other drugs. So, women were subjected to domestic violence. In the first wave, so the farm was closed to a few weeks due to the sugar and harvest season, after which the women had to work extra 2 hours in addition to the scheduled time from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Still, her daily wage was 740 rupees and she was not paid for the extra hours. Many in such families couldn't get rid of the habit, although they lost their jobs like they had spent their daily wages on alcohol and drugs before the plug. The result was the woman's salary was forcibly taken to spend on it. Some girls between the ages of 14 to 18 take with their mothers to the workplace as they were exposed to an unsafe environment due to the pandemic period. On this plantation, the houses are very small and built with minimal facilities. Accordingly, women working in the agricultural sector became a high risk category in their workplace as well as their families. They had to protect their daughters from men as well as prevent their boys from drugs and engaging in illegal activities. According to the graph, problem faced by agrarian women in plantation during the pandemic, the depression, anxiety disorder, panic attacks, post-traumatic disorders, and psychomatic disorders are very common among these agrarian state women. Then we will move to the conclusion. In conclusion, it can be crystal clear identified COVID-19 pandemic has held a magnifying glass to gender inequalities and in doing so has revealed cracks across mainly domains. In doing so, one thing is abundantly clear: the gender stereotypes, roles, and expectations underlying these inequalities are not sustainable and can cause undue harm, especially during times of crisis. There can be identified agrarian state society key sessions followed by she recovery, where female agrarian plantation forms the backbone of their economic recovery. So, if you have any questions, I would like to answer them. And thank you very much for giving me this valuable opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Geetanjali. That is done under time. We will come back to questions at the end. Next, we have uh, Senarath and Senarath from Rajarat University of Sri Lanka, presenting on the impact of nutmeg cultivation on the village economy. Uh, yeah, are you going to share screen?
Yes, madam.
Right. You can start when you're ready.
Okay, good evening everyone. I'm Yashoda Samarat from Faculty of Agriculture, Rajarata University of Sri Lanka. My topic is nutmeg impact of nutmeg cultivation on the village economy. Nutmeg is one of the minor export crop which is cultivated only in limited area in upcountry of Sri Lanka. The 80% of nutmeg cultivation extended in Kandy district, and other major growing areas are Kegol and Matale districts. Only in certain areas of Kandy district, there are specific areas where nutmeg cultivation is mainly done. There are Harispattuwa, Wattegama, Udanuwara, and Yatinura. Nutmeg is growing well in warm, humid conditions. In locations with an annual rainfall of 150 centimeters and more, and areas with clay loam, sandy loam, and red laterite. A large number of minor crops are in Sri Lanka.
Miss Senarat, hello. Miss Senarat, I'm interrupting you because your PowerPoint is not moving.
Uh,
Can you put it you need to change the slides, I believe.
Madam,
Now it's moving,
okay?
yes.
Okay, ma'am.
Right. You can, if you go down and see for us to follow. Next to the zoom in bar, there is a small icon here. That
Madam,
Yeah.
can I see it now in the PowerPoint
yeah, it's
presentation?
moving. Yes. Okay, that's fine. You can continue, but change the slides. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Madam, could I go to beginning? Can I go to begin?
No, you can continue from where you stopped about nutmeg types, I think.
Okay, ma'am. A large number of minor crops in Sri Lanka. In 1850, after British came to Sri Lanka and they developed the commercial economy. As a result, large surpluses of minor crops exported to other countries. Exporting mainly to India, USA, Russia, Germany, and Pakistan. Sri Lankan nutmeg and maize suppliers export oils and ground nutmeg and maize to global market. Let's move to the objectives. The main purpose of this study is the attempt was to identify how this cultivation impact on the economy of rural people, as well as the barriers they have to face in this regard. Also, finding the solutions to overcome those barriers. The methodology, first we decide the sample. The sample designing for the study purpose in sampling is selected. Sample size is 300 families in Kandy district. Include 150 families who directly depend on nutmeg cultivation, and other 150 families who cultivated nutmeg while being employed. In the data collection, the questionnaires included in the questionnaires are name, occupation, monthly income, the number of purchase available in the nutmeg, number of trees available, age of the tree. The reason for the asking such a question in many people in those areas have an opinion that when the trees become older and older, the nutmeg harvest become increased, and how to care and treat and how to sell the harvest. Are you selling them raw or dried, well ripened, half ripened, or removing outer cover like that? In data analysis, use qualitative and quantitative analysis using SPSS and Excel software. In the results, in this research data analysis, we can identify, find out that most of nutmeg cultivators get higher prices for their crops by selling the kernel, removing the outer cover. After drying nuts, then outer shell is removed by chop and kernel is dried. Kernel have higher prices than others. Some others sell them by drying in hot sun. With the income of nutmeg cultivation, it is clear that some people have done their will in their life and achieve good prospects, such as giving a good education to their children, like this. Quantitative analysis is done by Mihiri Senarat. Mihiri.
Okay. This is our quantitative analysis. This is our quantitative analysis. We have to use below equation for our quantitative analysis. Y equals C plus S, indicating Y is income, C consumption, and S is savings. Okay. Now compare two family groups. We have got two family groups. First 150 families who directly depend on nutmeg cultivation. Another 150 families who fulfill their living cost nutmeg earnings. They have other direct income, so they try to save money their income. Therefore, we can apply to Y equals C plus S. Another family groups. These families have direct income and nutmeg income. Both income they have. So they earn huge income per month and they can save money and they have to save money. So they have to save and we can apply to Y equals C plus S equation.
Okay, let's move to the finding. Some people who have regular income do not directly sell their harvest and they want to stock them. But due to lack of proper storage facilities, they have to face certain problems. Those who depend on nutmeg only are completed to sell their crop soon after the harvest to the available market, as they don't have any other income to survive. When they kept for a long time, mostly then get rotten. It is hard to do any under cultivation as these trees grows bigger, spreading their branches, roots. As a result, no other plants can't grow well due to the shed of these trees. When trees become older, sometimes they give good harvest, while some other trees do not give such a good harvest. I think it's depend on the fertility of the soil. When the soil is stony or sandy, trees become weak. When I observe, I found most nutmeg cultivators are ignore of the condition of the soil and techniques given by minor export authorities. They mostly depend on their traditional ways. If they become aware of new techniques available, they would be able to increase the harvest and income of this cash crop. Let's move to the conclusion. Finally, we talk with these people, all of sample people, we could identify rarely they get necessary advice from relevant agriculture officers to promote their cultivation and income. So finally, I recommend maintaining healthy trees and enrich the soil where trees grow, how to protect nuts from fungus and to get a higher income. The cultivator should do their best in increasing their harvest, as well as they must collect their harvest only when nuts are ripe enough to be harvested. Also, they should have a good knowledge of management of their income. Then they would be able to be satisfied with their nutmeg cultivation. So, if you have anything to clarify, I can you answer the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Yashoda and Mihiri. We will come to questions after the next. Right. The next presentation we have is from Vijay Surya Maunekam. I hope I said your right name correct. And Nana Karash from two universities, actually, University of Colombo and University of Peradeniya. Who's going to present? Is it?
It's me, Doctor. I'll be sharing my screen.
Okay.
All three of you are presenting, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose I have. Do you have permission to share screen? Or is it not necessary? Lara?
I have permission.
Right. Sure. Okay. Without much further ado, let's start the presentation then. The effects of the fertilizer crisis on food security in Sri Lanka.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair, panel, and my fellow researchers. So today, our research topic is on the effects of the fertilizer crisis on food security in Sri Lanka. Before, I hope I'm audible to the audience. We will be going through the concept of food security and the immediate effect of the food crisis, and also the historical insecurity, the green revolution and agrochemicals, and why are chemical fertilizer important, and the major effects of chemical fertilizer ban in Sri Lanka, and so on and so forth. So to start off our research presentation, we actually initially planned to have it include the primary data, as in to collect data from farmers, do interviews as well, but due to certain unavoidable circumstances, we couldn't conduct collect primary data, as in like interviews. So that is one of the limitations that we identified in our research. So our research is based on the secondary data that we gathered throughout our research. So moving on to the first slide, the concept of food security. So food security is a flexible concept as reflected by many attempts to define it in research and policy usage. The concept of food security actually originated around 50 years ago, at a time of global food crisis in the early 1970s. And according to Maxwell and Smith, 1992. Even 2 decades ago, there were about 200 definitions for food security in published and writings showing the contextual dependent features of the definition. But the currently widely accepted definition of food security came from the Food and Agriculture Organization annual report on food security, which we have presented on our slide and which we based our research on. So there are 4 dimensions of food security that has been identified according to the definition of FAO. First is the availability of food produced both locally and imported from abroad. Second, the accessibility. So the food can reach the consumer, and the latter has to have enough money for purchase. So such examples are identified as accessibility. And the third is utilization. So the individual must be able to eat adequate amount of both in quantity and quality in order to live healthy and full life to realize his or her potential. And a person must be physically healthy to be able to digest and utilize the food consumed. The fourth domain of stability deals with the ability of the nation, community, or household person to withstand shocks to the food chain system, whether caused by natural disaster or that are man-made crises like economic crisis, wars. Thus, it may be seen that food security exists at a number of levels: availability, accessibility, as I said, utilization, individual stability. However, all 4 of these dimensions must be intact for full food security to a country to be considered as a as secured properly with food security. Now, moving on to the next slide. When we talk about the current food crisis, the population continues to feel the brunt of the economic and food crisis. About 3 in 10 households, which is 6.26 million people, are food insecure. And according to the World Food Programme's latest food security assessment, food inflation is alarmingly high at 57.4%. These stats were taken in June 2022. And the majority of assessed households, which is 60%, are regularly employing food-based coping strategies such as eating less preferred and less nutritious food and reducing the amount of food they eat. So this is due to the food shortage in Sri Lanka, and also this has actually a ripple effect on malnutrition, especially among weak and vulnerable groups that we have identified: pregnant mothers, children, and newborn babies. Another thing, as I said, is inflation, which has caused a rise in the food prices. And according to the according to the UN reports, as prices keep healthy meals out of reach, 61% of households are regularly using coping strategies to cut down on costs, such as reducing the amount they eat and consuming increasingly less nutritious. So we identify this due to the fact that a sudden ban on fertilizer without a proper mechanism or without proper policies has actually caused a food crisis in Sri Lankan in Sri Lanka, which has also caused an economic crisis in general. So the farmers have given up their jobs due to the drop in the harvest they reap. So these are some of the effects, immediate effects of the food crisis due to the fertilizer ban that's been imposed. And Lara to discuss the historical evolution.
Thank you, Dhanmali. So in terms of historical insecurities, we can't view Sri Lanka in isolation, as the food networks of any region aren't usually limited to political boundaries. So a good example of this is Ceylon during the colonial period, in which the rice requirements, which were not met by local production, were imported from areas like Southeast Asia, especially Burma. So in World War II, in 1942, the Japanese army invaded Burma, which meant that the rice from Burma was not able to be transported to Ceylon. So this ties into what Ranmali mentioned as the points of food insecurity, which is lack of accessibility to food. In the same year, 1942, the Bengal region faced a severe rice disease, which caused a lack of availability of food. And Ceylon as a colony was very important to the British war effort. And so pressure was placed on the Indian government to supply rice to Sri Lanka, um, which is poor utilization of existing resources. And it's an administrative issue that contributed further to food insecurity at the time. And the final fallout of this was this Bengal famine of 1943, in which around 3 million civilians died as a result of food insecurity caused by these various factors, which are mainly man-made. So this is a good example of food insecurity in the past. I'll also be talking about the Green Revolution, which has been referred to as an exercise in neo-imperialism. And it took place in the 1950s and the 1960s, where certain new technologies were introduced to the developing world. These technologies included extensive use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and weedicides, as well as new varieties of seeds, including high-yielding varieties, which required chemical fertilizer for optimal production. In 1962, the Sri Lankan government introduced chemical fertilizers for these high-yielding varieties. And throughout the 1960s, in a bid to make Sri Lanka self-sufficient in rice, these agricultural inputs such as fertilizer were heavily subsidized. So one drawback of the Green Revolution is its top-down implementation. And this reduces the resilience of agriculture at other levels, or the ability of the agricultural system to withstand shocks. Another issue with the Green Revolution is the immense spending of foreign exchange on fertilizer. So in 1968, 110 million rupees was spent on importing fertilizer. The Green Revolution's use of technology has these inherent insecurities, the chief of which is this top-down implementation as opposed to grassroots level policies, which again contributes towards a breakdown in resilience. And this is nicely illustrated by this 62 who told us to use fertilizer and hybrid seeds, the government did. Now who told us to use organic fertilizer, the government did. They dictated the terms, and now they are responsible for this. And now Emanuela will explain the agricultural background to fertilizers and the use of chemical fertilizer.
Thank you, Lara. So moving on, if I'll start by talking about what the fertilizer is, because these days this is a common term, especially in the agricultural field since 2021 till date. So fertilizers by definitions, they are just mixtures or compounds that can either be mixed or as single, depending on its origin, and they can be in any form, either liquid, solid, or gas, and they are applied either onto the soil or upon the leaf foliage, the plant leaves. And so the nutrients that plants require to grow properly are mainly the nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. And these are the three major nutrients, in addition to others. So the fertilizers that are being produced are produced specifically in the form of these three nutrients. And when we talk about fertilizers, there are either the organic ones that are of natural origin, or the inorganic ones, which is the chemical fertilizers. Moving on to the next slide, the next slide, please, Lara. Right, thank you. So the chemical fertilizers that we are talking about these days, the chemical fertilizers that we are banned, they're the ones that are produced artificially. They are not of natural origin. They are produced artificially in order to meet the needs of the crops, right? And we cannot deny the fact that these fertilizers have their downsides, in as much as they have a lot of advantages, which I will talk about in the next slide, but they do have certain adverse environmental effects. In as much as they enrich the soil, in a long-term basis also, they have negative effects to the soil, to the environment, to the water bodies, and overall, by extension, they affect the biodiversity. Next slide. Right, so chemical fertilizers have a unique property, and because of this unique property, they are very vital to agricultural systems. Now, not just in Sri Lanka, but then globally, chemical fertilizers are used in agricultural fields. Why? Because they improve productivity, because they increase the output that we get from our crop fields, right? When harvest is done, crops take off certain nutrients from the soil. And when we apply chemical fertilizers, these fertilizers, they quickly release nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and all the needed nutrients. They quickly release them back into the soil. This is something that organic fertilizers do not do. Organic fertilizers are slow releasing. They release the nutrients in a slow pattern, which of course is sustainable, yes. But then when we talk about short-term crops like rice, then we literally need fertilizers that are fast releasing, that can replenish the soil and make our fields to be green and enable us have a productive season and very good harvest. Now, moving on to the next slide, we'll see the impact or the effects, just one or two effects of the ban that was effected last year. So Sri Lanka, being a country that is very well known for agriculture, there are various crops that are cultivated. But for this research, we put the light on rice, because once upon a time, this beautiful island nation was self-sufficient in rice. We didn't have a need to import rice. Once upon a time, we produced enough to feed ourselves and even had surplus in some farming season. The rice is a staple food, and over the years, the government has supported the farmers, supported the Rice Research Institute in developing high-yielding cultivars. And the thing with the high-yielding cultivars is they produce more, and as their potential increases, their need for fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, also increase, because for these crops to produce more, then they actually need the nutrients, fast releasing nutrients, in order to produce more. So the demand for fertilizer increased as the potential for high yield also increased. Now with the ban, this high productivity is being threatened. And in the next slide, there's a table of statistics that we would look at. So this table here shows paddy production statistics from 2018 to 2021. For this research, we actually look back 20 years of paddy production. And I must tell you that the data for 2021 is significantly different. I mean, we can just clearly see it from 2018, 19, 20, even 2020, that was the COVID year. This effect, this low yield wasn't seen in 2020. But then in 2021, we can see that there's a very, very obvious decline in production. Now, is this a coincidence, or is this as a result of the ban that was effected early last year? Now, as a result of this, there was, because the local production was low, there was increase in importation of rice and as well as other food items. Moving on to the next slide. Right, so moving forward, yes, we know that chemical fertilizers are not 100% all good without any negative effects. They do have negative effects. However, the best way is not to outrightly ban them or stop their usage. That is far-fetched. The country is not yet ready to venture into 100% organic farming. So it would take gradual transition, right? And if we go on to the next slide, we'll see that we can merge both using chemical fertilizers as well as organic farming. So instead of using 100% chemical fertilizers, we can use maybe say 60% chemical fertilizers and 40% of other organic options, like using compost, using biofertilizers, using green manure, like Sesbania. We can commit to integrated nutrient management approach where we combine what we find in nature, green manure, compost, biofertilizers, as well as a fraction of chemical fertilizers. Finally, a research was recently conducted, and farmers themselves acknowledged that yes, it is best if we mix the two. That's the last slide. So overall, it's advisable if we can have a merge of both organic farming and using chemical fertilizers instead of just banning chemical fertilizers. Thank you.
Thank you, Lara, Ranmali, and Emanuela. That was a very interesting presentation. Right. So if there are any questions, we would like to take them for any of the presenters from the audience. If there are any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask the question, or use the chat facility to ask the question. Until you all get your thoughts together, I shall proceed with my comments. So let me start with the last presentation, the effects of the fertilizer crisis on food security in Sri Lanka. I think it's a very interesting presentation and a very timely presentation. I'm glad that young researchers like you take interest in things like this, agricultural sector, the rural society at large. Actually, that goes to all three presentations. because it seems that social sciences are lacking, or rather not very much into research in the rural society anymore, thinking that it's more of an urban society that we're living in. But that's not really true, because as your presentation showed, there's a lot happening in the rural society, and there is a rural society in Sri Lanka, which is actually the majority of the Sri Lankan population as well. So coming back to Lara Ranmali's and Emanuela's presentation, it was, I mean, very, as I said, it was very interesting to see what you're trying to say. So, of course, there's a food security issue that will emerge in time to come, and you can see the roots of it, or the uh, like you can see it forming now. There is a lot of malnutrition and a lot of scarcity of food happening. And with the import banning, of course, as you all pointed out, there is less accessibility to food as well. Something interesting that I wanted to ask the three of you is that you all touched upon the fertilizer issue, and you touched upon the fact that it was the government who dictated fertilizer use, and next the organic fertilizer usage. That is very true, because I myself research around the North Central province, and the farmers there tell me that they were reluctant to go to using fertilizers back in the 1960s, when the Green Revolution took over Sri Lanka as well. And at that time, they were given fertilizer free of charge, so that they will get used to it. They were actually provoked to use it, just like they tried to do with organic fertilizer recently. So, and I do understand that the fact that fertilizer usage brings more harvest, but sometimes more than the organic fertilizer usage. The question that I'm trying to ask here is that is it not also a problem of the type of seeds that you're using? The fact that the local seeds are more fertile and more harvesting than the hybrid seeds that we are now using, which were given to the farmers through the Green Revolution. Isn't the seeds the problem more than the fertilizer? The fact that we are not growing the local seeds anymore. That is one question. And the second question I have for you is the fact that you all discussed about the fact that Sri Lanka historically had self-sufficient rice cultivation, like we had enough for the population. But with time, you know that population growth increases, and it is not as easy as it was to be self-sufficient anymore. In that case, what are your suggestions? Would the mix method work even with the growing population? Would we be able to have food security even if even only with even by using both organic fertilizer and the chemical fertilizers? Or what is your solution? Those are my two questions for you all. Anyone can answer.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am, for that question. So for the first question, you asked if the seeds were the problem or the fertilizer is the problem, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I wouldn't directly say that the seeds are the problem, because the high yield that we get is because of the hybrid seeds. The fact that rice, we got self-sufficient in rice is because of the development of the hybrid seeds. And where one of the perks of the hybrid seeds is their need for more nutrients in order to get high yields. So the seeds, I wouldn't say the seeds are the problem. And then for the fertilizer, well, if we cannot directly say that fertilizer is the problem either. It depends on the lens through which we are looking at it and the angle from which we are looking at it. If we're looking at it from the environmental aspect, then, well, we can blame the fertilizers being the problem. Or rather, not even the fertilizers, but the excessive use of the fertilizers. Because one thing with the local farmers is that they don't completely adhere to the recommendations given by the Department of Agriculture. For each variety, each hybrid variety of paddy that has been released by the department, they've also given specific recommendations, right? But then these farmers, they go over and above and they go beyond the recommendations given and they just apply a lot and lot. I saw that when I was working in the northern province. I worked with some of the farmers for agricultural extension. So they don't heed to the recommendation, and this in turn leads to environmental effects and also economic problems, because the government gives subsidy and they get the fertilizer at low cost, but they don't use it responsibly. So that's an issue, very sensitive issue.
So, anybody else for the first question on population growth and the food security? Or would you like me to clarify the question?
I'm sorry, Doctor. Could you? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, please, Doctor.
Yeah. So the question that I'm asking is now you all mentioned the fact that Sri Lanka has been a self-sufficient nation in the past, and I'm asking, of course, population has been growing ever since, and the population at that time would have been less, so therefore obtaining self-sufficiency would be easier. But as time goes, with the technologies increase, allowing people to live longer and having more babies, the population is growing. So in such a case, what is the solution? Do you think that a mixed method of chemical fertilizer and organic fertilizer will be able to meet the demand of a growing population to attain food security? Am I audible?
Okay. So for your second question, yes, the population is rising, but apart from the population rising, technology is also advancing. So with the population being on the rise, we're also getting new knowledge as scientists, as biotechnologists, as development researchers. So we can use that to our advantage, right? If I got your question correctly,
yeah.
Even as the population is increasing, we can still attain food security. We can still be self-sufficient in certain food products like rice. Maybe not now, maybe not in the very near future, but then at some point we can still get there, because the time at which Sri Lanka attained food security it took a long time before they got there to that point. So from now here on, if a mixed method is completely adopted, using chemical fertilizers as well as organic farming, and probably development of better yielding varieties, right? The Rice Research Institute and other biotechnology centers can help to develop better yielding varieties, varieties that are pest resistant, varieties that are disease resistant for specific diseases that affect the yield of rice and of other crops. I mean, this is not just specific for rice, but then even extends up to other crops. So we can use the technology advancement to our advantage in addition to the mixed farming, using integrated nutrient management system. And we can get there. It's not an impossible feat, even with the growing population.
Right. Thank you, Emanuela. I mean, I'm thrilled at the optimism that you all have. Yeah, but I would also encourage you to look at Vandana Shiva's work in India. Maybe you're familiar with that already, and where she speaks of how the Green Revolution works and the actual challenges or the issues that are raised within the global economy. Because how this politics of seeds and fertilizer works within the global economy. I would suggest that you think of things a bit more critically as well. But I mean, I'm thrilled with your optimism as well. Thank you so much. Any questions from the audience for these presenters? If there are any questions, please do mention on the chat or raise your hand so that we can give you the opportunity. Next, I would like to comment on Senarat and Senarat's paper on the impact of nutmeg cultivation on village economy. I did enjoy your paper. I felt that it was an area that nobody speaks much about. Like we do talk a lot about rice, but less research is done about spices and other cultivations, which are actually beneficial to Sri Lanka. We can actually create a export market for spices like this, but of course it's still not that practical, or it's not happening as it should as yet. So that's Mihiri and Yashoda. In your presentation, I wished you spoke a bit more about your methodology. Like you all said that you conducted a survey and interviews with 300 families. That is quite a lot of families, and 150 who are directly involved in nutmeg cultivation, and the other 150 who are involved in nutmeg cultivation and other employments. So that's a very large sample. I wonder if this is a project that you're doing with others involved rather than just the two of you. And I would like to know more about your methodology. How did you approach them? How did you find these farmers? What were your techniques? That's one question. And of course, you all mentioned that it was that they had issues of storage, and the size of the trees were a problem because they take a lot of space, and the soil, they were not looking after soil as much as they should, so that the soil erosion is more. I wished you actually focused or linked your findings with the current situation or the village economy itself, where you speak about, like if you're talking about village economy, you need to know an overall understanding of what kind of economy that there is. And what is the contribution of nutmeg cultivation compared to other cultivations that are there in the economy or other means of income that are there in the economy. So an overall view of the village economy is a part that I thought was missing in your presentation. Yashoda, Mihiri, anything you would you like to explain a bit more about your methodology?
Madam, I personally interviewed the cultivated farmers. So in my area, I'm from Kandy district. So there are a lot of farmers are cultivated this nutmeg. So I got information from Harispattuwa, Wattegama, Udunuwara and Yatinwara area. In district, these areas, Ankumbura, Wattegama, Pujapitiya and other villages, they cultivated more. But Galagedera like areas, they are not cultivated this nutmeg due to hot weather conditions. In my area, there is a there is very big cultivation. It has in my home garden has 100 more than 100 years old trees and more than 100 trees. So there are a lot of farmers I found and I personally interviewed them.
All 300?
150 farmers
Interview.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's quite a large number. How long did it take you to do that?
I personally visited, ma'am.
Yeah, how long did it take you? Did it take you a month or 2 or 3?
In January, from January.
This year?
Yes, January.
It's pretty, it's very, I mean, it's interesting that you were able to interview 300 farmers within such a short time, like 9 months. Then, my advice would be like for you to actually, yes, you can do a quantitative research. You can give a questionnaire and gather information. And then you can of course do another sample from the quantitative data you have and do a smaller qualitative survey, which will give you more in-depth detail about the lifestyles, the issues, the contributions to the village economy as such. But yeah, interesting presentation, and I think it's better if you focus more on the surveyed quantitative aspect as well, because you mentioned how those who are only doing nutmeg cultivation, they are not as wealthy as the ones who are doing nutmeg cultivation plus another sort of employment. So I would have it would have been more interesting to know more about the two categories and their lifestyles and how they contribute to the village economy. The village economy itself is a concept that you need to flesh out. How are you defining this village economy? It's not just a random thing like because you're actually talking about a village, a certain area. So I would have liked you to give us an idea about what that village economy is. So those are a few things for you to think about, and also bring in the social aspect of these farmers. It's not just about the nutmeg cultivation, it's also about their life. So that's something for you all to think about. Thank you, Yashoda and Mihiri. The first presentation by Geetanjali on gender inequality in agrarian sectors during the COVID-19 pandemic. And you were discussing why did women in the agrarian sector became more vulnerable than men. I felt, yes, you mentioned about alcohol, domestic violence, and women's labor exploitation. I felt that your presentation lacked case studies or the stories behind these women. What you mentioned was very much the general overview that all of us know. We know that there is a gender inequality in the agrarian sector. We know that women were more vulnerable during the pandemic. In the agrarian sector, they were more marginalized. They're generally marginalized anyway. So I didn't feel that you gave us anything substantial, Geetanjali. I mean, when you do a presentation, it's good to tell us a story, tell us something new. Tell us like you spoke of gender stereotypes, you spoke about the families, in the agrarian sector, but more about their lifestyles or this Paravilavatta, where is it? What is so special about Paravilavatta, and how do you see the women in Paravilavatta? What do they do, and how are they trying to overcome, or how are they countering gender inequality? Because women or people in general have ways of countering or have ways of resilience within difficult times or difficult areas. They have resilience. So it would have been better if you fleshed out these kind of aspects in your presentation. I thought it was very too short actually, and not very informative, but good effort to all of you, all presenters. I suppose you're all early career young researchers, so you have a long way to go. And I hope this panel and comments helped you to kind of streamline your research work and to think in different ways for when you do future research. So I wish you all the best. And I don't think we have more questions. So I wish you all the best, and good luck with your future research. Thank you very much for joining with this panel and submitting to this conference. We will hope to see you again at some point at another conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tharindi Udalagama, for chairing the session today. We hope that all of you had a very insightful session. Thank you very much.